Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, folks. How you doing? Good. Jedi, can you see? Good. So here we are, day 3, I guess, of live coding practice. Today, I've been having a little bit of an internal crisis about this, what to do today. And I think the thing that's going to be, well, I'll put it up to you guys. One thing that needs to happen to this code base is we need to get authentication working. And it's close, but I don't think it's actually working yet. And I'd actually be inclined to continue the like button project that we started and clarify where we are in the specs and what needs to happen, rather than trying to come up with something new and having to like just start all over. So yeah, I think let's do that. And so let's start with the authentication and see if we can get that up and running. So, and Hannah, this is the code base that we were working on. So we did add express session, and we added this bit of code in the authentication sign in route where we add to rec.session user, the user object. Now, I'm not sure if the user object is actually coming back from our database call. So the next thing that I want to do is create some way to find that out. So I'm actually going to make a little middleware here. App.use, and we're going to take request, response, next. And here, what we just want to do is we're going to console.log session and then we'll just do rec.session. And then we'll call next. So a little middleware to help us see what the heck is in the session. So
we're not using HTTPS as nothing. On the app.use session, we have a security set to true.
Yeah, I wonder about that.
I think that causes issues if it's not
yeah.
HTTPS.
Yeah, that the browser would theoretically not be sending it. So, restarting the server. All right. So if we go to sign in, because we already have a user, 1, 2, 3. Okay, good. So I also created a route that /info that just sends some JSON to the screen. So we can also check here. We can see our middleware is probably working too. Yep. Session. let's see. Session at first did not have it, and now a session has a user on it. So that's good. Let me just mute my notifications from my lovely wife. Cool. So now we can handle the authorization logic because we can always just check if rec.session.user is handled. So good. So let's go back to the spec. And what I want to do is show you the way and the kind of level of detail that I would approach this at this point, and then have somebody else take over the coding. So, and I'll say that I think this is a really good start, what we did kind of collectively yesterday, writing this out. And so let me show you the kind of like increased level of detail that I'd go into. So thinking about this spec from the data upwards again, I'm going to just list everything, including the stuff that we do. So we know that we need something in the schema to represent likes, and we have that. So update schema with way to represent likes. And that's good. So we won't go into any more detail on that, but if I was writing this out for myself, I might say, okay, so many to many relationship means we need a join table between users and albums, right? So being very specific about that. Next, so we got the data piece working. We've got ensure authentication flow is working and user is being set on session. So looking back up at the spec, user can click like on an album, number of likes persist. Users are only able to like an album when logged in. So what we want, yeah, I'm trying to think on the server side if we want to implement anything else authorization-wise, or if we can just kind of cobble this together with the check to rec.session.user. Say it again.
It seems like that'd be the same thing we do for actually using my passport. You like there's authenticated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we could actually even write our own little is authenticated. But
your middleware should already be that, isn't it, technically?
the one we were just looking at, the let's see.
It returns to the user if there is a user on the session.
So you're saying this one that we just wrote?
No, that's just walked back.
What's that?
I thought it actually returned true or false.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's fine to leave it, to not build any more infrastructure on this, because anywhere we need to ensure that the person is logged in, we can just check rec.session.user. Okay, so one of the things that I knew I wanted to clarify was the route handling. So create routes, and then specifically, so we know for this we need a get, or let's see, a post to slash, and we're going to say slash API slash likes slash album ID. And then this handles adding a like to an album by a particular user. So we also need, what else do we need? You know, I'm actually not sure that we need another route. Tell me if you think I'm off. because while it would be nice to be able to ping the API for how many likes a particular album has, we can just render that at server rendering time. And then if the person likes it, just increment the counter by 1. We don't actually have to go back to the server. So for implementing this spec, I don't know that we need any routes other than the way to like a particular album by a particular user. Does that sound right? Say it again.
Yeah, we don't even need a route. We just need to be able to call for like count the likes later, but that doesn't need a route.
Yeah, so when after the person clicks a like button. Yeah. Yes. I'm going to plug in this microphone because that's usually helpful. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen yet. Okay. Hold on a second. Okay, good. So we've got the data, we've got authorization, which I think we've taken care of. So now we need to update the route for an individual album page so that it's sending the number of likes along with it. And then that page, so this is the view, we need to do a number of things. We need to add a like button. We need to add a like count. We need to add some client-side JavaScript to post to the API when like is clicked, and to increment the counter. Do you see what I'm doing? It's a little bit greater level of detail that that allows us to be very specific about what we're attacking at what point. What else about this view? We need to. There's something about if users clicked the. If a user has liked the album they are viewing, a red border is displayed around the like button. So.
We also would want to decrement if the user clicked on the like button twice.
No, so that's not part of the spec. And that'd be one thing, you know, you may have a thought like that as you're going through a challenge like this, like, oh, it should be doing this. But make sure you check the spec to see, is it actually required? Because you may end up making more work for yourself otherwise. So to add red border and to increment the counter. And then I guess the easiest way to do this would be yeah, to just render the page with a red border if the user has already liked the page. So so if user has already liked page, render red.
Like album, not page.
Was that?
Like album, not page.
Yes, thanks. Cool. So displays the total number of likes from all users. So we need to write a database query that I don't think we've written yet. To actually get that total number of likes. Write database query to get total number of likes per album. And Hannah, maybe we did that. I don't remember.
We restarted to, but there's an issue with having to, I think, call it without re-rendering the page.
Yeah. So we'll check on this one. Let's see. So I just want to put a note for myself here that send along whether the user has already liked the page, the album. So that's one additional piece of data we know we want to send. So being clear about that before we write the code. Is this missing anything? Does this look pretty complete?
Do you want to go in detail like this for the case in the case of the assessment itself, or would you? I mean, this is more practical for if you're actually building the kind of feature like this, or portion building.
Mm-hmm.
But with the time allowed, would I even have time to actually do like a breakdown, more detailed or granular about the steps?
Yeah. So the question is, should I do this during the assessment?
Yes.
That is up to you and your particular like learning, thinking, processing style. For me, I would do this. Chances are, I mean, not chances, the actual assessment is going to be significantly less complex than this particular feature.
I hope so.
Like, you know, the types of things you'll encounter in there just have fewer moving parts. I'll say it that way, because this has quite a bit going on from front end to back end that's taking us actually quite a bit of time to do. But for me, the process of actually doing this when you first start a challenge like this or when you're first building a feature is part of the development process. Like in my mind, it would be kind of foolhardy, at least for me, to dive into coding something if I hadn't clarified what the heck it is I'm coding, right? If I wasn't clear on the routes that I'm going to write, it would be not a good idea for me as a developer to open up the routes and just start writing something, because I might be doing extra work. I might not be writing the right kind of route. You know, I might get into a kind of thing where I'm writing an API route where it's actually a route that's supposed to render a page or vice versa. So to me, this is part of the development process, and it, you know, usually doesn't take that long, but you're doing this step of going from a spec to the implementation. And then once you do this, you can get into the coding. So I would do it, and there's no requirement that you do this. If you can successfully approach a new spec like this and not do this and still be successful, you know, go for it.
I doubt it, but yes. Yes, thank you.
So, yeah, so let's get some folks coding. Who wants to volunteer for today? Coders. Jenna? Kane?
Yeah.
Can I call you reluctant Anna?
Appropriate. No, it's appropriate.
Okay. Who else? Anybody else? Mike? You're gonna jump in on this? Okay. Cool. Jenna, you want to start?
Are we making yours?
Yeah, coming over here.
strange landscape.
I know, right? Yeah, and this is a separate screen, so
Okay.
there's where you are.
So I'm taking it away from Yourish.
Mhm.
Do this create post
So as you look at this list, what stands out to you as the logical next thing to do?
I want to make sure there's this DB query exists, because a lot of this is going to piggyback off of that.
Yep, that's the same way I would do it too.
And, let's see here. Oops. So we don't have one to just get likes.
There's count like.
Count like?
Oh. So let's start from harmonics there. Harmonics, that's in our schema.
And speak up as much as possible.
Okay, sorry, yeah. I'm just checking I haven't seen most of this code, so I'm just seeing what's connected where. Returning one value here. Okay, cool. All right. So yeah, we've got that then.
And the count like again, if you go back, why is that DB1?
We're just returning one single value, but we're selecting a random, well, not a random amount, but a variable amount of things.
So DB.
Maybe that query, maybe?
Yeah, db.any is the one that I would use.
What's the difference between any?
I would do a many or none personally.
I just think of query as the generic one and any as specifying like if I put db.any, that's telling the developer it's not one or none, it's not none, it's any. So it's distinguishing between those.
And I think query defaults to any. So.
Yeah.
Let's see, API.
Right.
Likes.
Save those two.
And now is count like being exported?
Yes, it's the default export.
Okay, and is it being imported by? Do we just access the actions directly, or?
I think we have been.
Yeah.
There's no like separator controller. There is a file for that, but it's never been used.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, got it. Yep.
Yeah, it's this index here, or there's an index file in here that has a whole bunch of links, but they're just not used anywhere. Let's see.
So you might want to add the count like to the actions, maybe the imports.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out. So I have to create the this API likes album ID, and
we started that.
Index.js in the routes folder.
We have an index, okay. Oh yes, we do. Cool. So album ID is rec.params. We need to make sure that we're getting the album ID.
Now, the syntax that's there already accomplishes what you just did.
Okay.
Who's familiar with destructuring syntax? Anybody not? So let me just take over for 1 second. So just so you know, because you're going to see this quite a bit, these two lines are identical. They do the same thing. Mm-hmm. And you see how this is working? We're either saying create a variable album ID and assign it to rec.params.album ID, the same thing. But if we're in this case where this thing is the same as what we want to create out here, you can actually just use this syntax with the brackets on the left side of the equals to say, pull this key off of this object. Cool. Yeah.
And also, quick question. So another way, maybe that I've been trying to do it like recently is that so basically add like on line 21 can take a object, right, instead of like taking those two params. Instead of like
can.
taking, we can actually pass in like rected params,
Sure.
and it will just grab the stuff from the params, right? The
Sure.
both IDs and stuff. So
Yeah.
you kind of save us the two lines that are above the function call itself.
Yeah, and do things like that judiciously.
Mhm.
So sometimes it makes sense to pass an object to a function where there are multiple keys, especially in a case where you might have some keys. One time you call the function, and other keys, another time you call the function, and like where if you had a bunch of kind of arguments separated out, it might get kind of hairy.
Mhm.
That would be a case to use an object.
Mhm.
But oftentimes it's clearer for other developers if you
Sure,
actually
sure.
explicitly put the
Absolutely.
arguments.
Jump back to this.
Yeah, so you want to go ahead and delete line 17.
Cool. Let's see here. Like,
And now just to be clear, so line 17 now, we need to get that a different way because we're actually, rec.session has a user object
mhm.
and the user object has a key ID.
Okay.
So
So rected session.user.
dot ID,
Okay.
pretty sure.
I'm sure it will.
We had initially done it a different way and then I ended up just putting the whole user on the session.
Let's quick about the user ID. Album ID. Boom, boom, boom. 1, 2, turn. That should give us back an album like.
So let me pause you, Jedi. For everyone, what does this route do?
Technically, this is the number of likes depending on the album ID that's passed to the route.
Say it again.
Suppose is it add likes?
Yeah, it adds a like.
It basically adds a like to a particular album.
Yes.
Yes.
And
Just a three thing.
And
So
then
it's
returns.
add a like counter and then return get rid of that data on the album page.
okay, so that last part, can you be a little clearer about that? What?
Because it sends back to JSON that they did the total likes. And my understanding is that shows that on the album page to show the total of the likes. So first it creates a like, count it, and then sends that back to the render show on the album page.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So good. So this is a part where I want to make sure everybody's really clear on this, because we're calling this an API route. We're distinguishing between routes that render a page or render a view, and routes that do something with the data and where you interact with it programmatically. And so in this case, this is, like you said, it takes in something in a post body. And we should check, by the way, if we have a body parser set up. So we do.
Yeah, it was like in the initial repo.
Rad.
Body parser.
Awesome.
Yeah, looks good.
So this route has got to take something in the body. It's got to do the database stuff. And then it's really up to us what happens after that. We could return some JSON, and this is often a good idea to indicate that the call was successful. But if you think of how this route is going to be used, it's going to be used from a fetch call on the page itself. And the purpose of that fetch call really is to just add this thing to the database. So we get to decide, do we send back total number of likes? Do we send back success equals true? Do we, whatever it is. But again, this is something that's going to send back some JSON, not a page.
And this does look complete.
So
Where's count like coming from?
my only. Oh, okay. I see. We're calling count like.
Yeah. Where? There we go. Count like. Okay, cool.
So
if it's
again,
not-
the call to count like here, in my mind, is not strictly necessary. And if I were doing this in a challenge, I would actually forego doing this, because again, for the spec that's indicated, we just need to be able to like a thing, and that needs to increment by 1. In an app like Facebook, you might want to do this where, once you make a database query, you're getting back the current number of likes, so it can go from 14 to 17 to 40,000 to whatever. But in this case, the simplest way to do this would be to actually not make that additional database query. So up to you. We already have it in here.
Turn the points to undo work. I mean, it seems like this route actually is pretty much done. In that case, we are taking in, we're adding our like, we're checking our amount, and then we're sending it back. So I should go into just getting the amount of likes. So, start. Ooh, actually.
And now with this one, if you go back to the to-do list.
Yeah, because we do have. That's adding. I don't think we have a. We didn't specify what we were going to do for just getting the amount. I think that was on our albums page, I believe you said.
Yeah, so this was something that I maybe glossed over a little too quickly, but I had initially thought, yeah, definitely we need a route to get the number of likes programmatic, an API route. But do we?
I don't think so.
Because again, we can render the page with the number of likes at the time of render. So we can get that initial number there through that method, through infrastructure that's already present. Yeah.
So does that mean that we should be rendering the page with all the likes and just on the front end making it look like we're adding one, and then on the back end adding it, but never actually recalling the back end?
Recalling the back end meaning?
So like count the total?
Correct.
Okay, so like, okay.
Yeah, and you can think of web pages that might have this functionality. You load the current number of something. You want the person to be able to add one, like a thing, heart a thing, star a thing, whatever. And when they do that, you've got to persist that. You've got to get that into the database. But the less important part of this is, do I have a current, accurate, up-to-date total?
Yeah.
And so in this case, it's not required in the spec that it have an updated total at the time that you do that. And so we can just keep this simple.
If it was required, wouldn't it be simple to use Ajax to just fetch the data from, that roll number from the data, and just have that show on the page right now? That would be a good way to do it.
Or just, what about just doing, like, so what we already have written, having the count like, why not just call that when the page initially loads?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or
That's what I was going to
call?
do.
Like either would work?
Yeah, so if you were in an interview setting and you were trying to decide, okay, should I write an API route and then make a Ajax fetch call to get the number of likes when the page, after the page loads, or should I just send the number of likes when the page renders through like res.render, and then just use EJS to put that in the page. Which one makes the most sense to you? Which one would you choose?
If it was up to me, I would go with Ajax because I don't want to like refresh or like reload the page every time I want to have the total of the likes show. With Ajax, my understanding is that you can have that, you can have to communicate with data basically, and then take the total number, have that show on the page without having to refresh the page and reload everything. So it might be a smoother process, or maybe like faster to show. When you click a like, you just update that number instead of having to refresh the whole page.
Yeah. So in a project that you're working on, say you're working on Rome, that would be a fine thing to do. I still would render the page with a certain number of likes already.
because you don't want the page to show up with 0 likes and all of a sudden then like 2 seconds later it has 40 likes. Like the better user experience is it loads with some initial number of likes. Implementing this functionality where you're updating the number of likes, you know, periodically, or maybe when someone clicks a button, or every 10 minutes, or you know, whatever. Totally up to you to do that. But one of the things that I want folks to see is that in the context of this challenge with these specs, it's not necessary and it would be extra work for you. So not a bad idea, but when the task at hand is take some specs, implement them in an efficient and simple way, that would be a way to give yourself some extra work. Yeah.
I'm a little like frustrated because I know that like we're like, I feel like I'm hearing two things, which is like when you're trying to get something done really quick, do it a slightly more choppy way, which is fine and it makes sense during like an interview and that process, but also what's the right way to do it, you know? Like what should we be like aspiring towards in our code versus like learning how to do just to get through an interview?
Well, it's up to you, and I'm glad you're asking the question. The important thing for you to do as a developer is to understand, either because it's your decision or because you have a design team that has said this is what they want the user experience to be. What is the user experience that I want? Do I want the page to load and it has a little spinner, and when the spinner is done it shows the number of likes and there's a little animation? Do I want the page to load like with already having those number of likes, and maybe that updates 20 seconds after it loads? There's no right way with that. And I'm glad you're asking that question, but there's these are relatively subjective questions, and with the exception of this like hacking something by putting a route in like the index file versus creating a new file, I in general am not trying to tell you to write things in a choppy way, like a kind of kludgy way is the way that I would put it. I'm encouraging you to do it in the simplest way that meets the spec, and that's going to carry from an interview context like this to any developer context where your goal at first is to get the MVP working, minimum viable product. Can we get this thing up and running just without a lot of extra fuss? Yep. Cool. Carry on.
All right. On that note, let's see. I'm gonna write some notes here now. Let's see. We have likes and counts. I'm going to use those. So I'm very distracted with all y'all in front of me. Sorry. Use those to send back. So we're getting here. We're getting our albums. Then we are rendering a page with our albums. So somewhere along here, we can go ahead and get the amount of likes. Normally, I would use async. Wait for this, but it's not already set up, and I'm not going to screw with what's been done here. So I'm going to probably insert something along here.
So are we editing the right route?
This is getting our albums. I think what I actually want to do is in the index, which pulls this in.
Double check the spec.
Double check. Let's see. Create routes. Update route for individual album page. So it sends the number of likes. Individual album page.
Oh, so it's the same when you were on, but it's the second round. So you're getting the individual album ID.
Boom. Yes, that is correct. Haha. Get album by ID, not all albums. And then what I'm doing now. All right, so we're getting our album by ID. Then we are taking our album. We are rendering that information back. We have our album. I'm going to do a little thingy. Copy, boom. Oops. Where did this go? All right. So then I'm going to take our album. All right. All right. We're going to go to likes for this album, which is count like, which we're not using yet. From actions, and that is correct.
So everybody tracking with what he's doing right now?
Cool. And then I'm going to use, since we already have the album ID, .program's album ID, and then we're going to finish like we did normally, but we're also going to send out our amount of likes. So just want to make sure you're going to count like is sending back all album likes. Okay. And again, what are album likes? Just user ID and album ID. So that should be sending back an amount of records. I'm gonna say, or amount of likes for records. All right, likes. Let's not render. Make sure we get enough of that. Yeah, album and likes. I might need to do .length because I believe that count like is going to send me back an amount of records and not necessarily a number of likes. So I'm going to add .length. And then I should check album and make sure that's being pulled in somewhere.
Did you notice something, Hannah?
Yeah, you probably want to do the likes.length outside and set it as a variable and then send it in as an object.
So just get length from inside EJS, you're saying?
Or, well, I would send it just in as a number because you don't need any of the information sent. So I'd say above the res.render, I do total likes equals likes.length. And then send in album and total likes.
Yeah, this is a syntax error.
Oh, okay.
Because if you remember, and sometimes we forget these things because we get so used to them, this is actually a shortcut in NES6. And what it's saying is likes.length should equal likes.length, but you can't have a key with a dot in it. So you could do it Hannah's way, or you could just you could put likes : likes.length. One isn't better than the other.
I personally like this more because I don't like to add more code. It's such a really simple thing. We're just getting the number. Yeah, it's really legit.
On 26, you need a dot before then.
26. Yes, I do. All right. Let's clean this up. Get album by ID. Cool. And all right, so we have nothing to, no kind of like info thing here. So I'm just gonna kind of do this as quickly as I can think. I'm gonna make a div and make a p likes. I'm actually kind of lying because this likes that's there is just it's going to become a number in a second. I just want to put something there so I can keep going along here. Stuff that into a like amount ID so I can find it later. And I don't even need to do that. Cause I'm going to leave that there for now because I probably will want to I will want to access this from JavaScript so I can increment it later. But I can make this an EJS variable. And this is going to be likes. Do we name it likes? Likes, yes. Likes, boom. All right, so now this should go through, it should render our album, it should render our likes.length.
Jen, I have a question. Why would you want to make it a JS?
What's up?
On line 7, I'm not sure why. Can you explain that more?
So the reason that I'm doing this EJS syntax is this is going to turn, it's going to give me the value that likes is. That's specifically with the percent and equal sign. Equal sign says output the value to the HTML or whatever that you're using it in. You could use this same syntax like up here, and then I could put likes, and then it would be like ID, however many amount of likes we actually have. That's just what that does. And there's no need for this div. So I'm going to 86 that.
What do folks think? What were you saying, James?
I want to see if it works.
Yeah, do we have an easy browser available?
Yeah.
I don't want to dig around.
And I want to put the word like before the number so that it's.
Say it again.
Like a label for the like.
Or even just a word.
You can do that.
Or word order.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Cool. And that was under albums. Right, albums 1. Oh, no, it can't be reached.
Server ID?
So run.
I like to hear that. That's it's good that your mind is like debugging server.
It looks like it's not.
Look at there's another terminal window. If you do command backtick, it sends you back and forth between one application's windows. And this
Something is going wrong. Let's see, unexpected token somewhere.
Oh,
Yeah,
is that
you
just
didn't
the-
close out your parentheses
Oh, back here.
in the route.
See what? Where's that? Albums.
I guess they also did this silly thing that they made a routes instead of router. It's like gotten me several times.
Yeah.
So if we get
Right, I'm using. Let's just router.
Routes plural is when you're indexing because it's like a
Which one is it? 29.
and router
where it's
is
confusing.
referencing a single route.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And it's a little,
Disappointed with that.
yeah.
So who said the thing about the parentheses? And why did you say that? What were you thinking about?
What do you mean?
Was it that you remembered that from when we were coding? Okay.
Well, also it says it in the error.
Yeah,
What did
so
you fix
what,
there? Sorry, what did you fix?
What's that?
What did you fix again? Sorry, what did you change?
I forgot this
Oh, the
parenthesis right here.
Gotcha.
so what I want for folks is for you to be able to see an error like that and very quickly know exactly what's going on. So if you go back to the error, we're looking at it, syntax error, you know that it's, it's not a library, it's not whatever. This is like, parentheses missing or a comma or something like that.
Yeah.
And then always look at the actual file so you know exactly which file you're talking about, the line number and everything. And that gets you very close. And then the trick is sometimes when it's like a closing parentheses, sometimes it'll be pointing to the line where the parentheses open, for example.
I was gonna ask how you notice that, because I'm like,
It also helps
I wouldn't
like
have caught that.
Anytime
on
I
my
see syntax error, it's almost always a parenthesis or like a comma or something.
For sure.
no, also like it's what they want to say about line 29. I will tell you like the zero basically it tells you like what portion of the line.
Mhm.
So this one like indicates like at the beginning of the line. So kind of sometimes art also helps me. It's halfway through the line, like if I didn't know the line, it's part of it.
Sure. Alright. So now this should run. Oh, hey, Malibu. There's no likes on it. We could programmatically add a like.
I would say like 0 likes, which I'm not to be a pain in the ass.
Well, you know what? We can fix that afterward. Let's see the so adding a like. What was the route that we called that? Because we can test that by. We have to sign in first.
You don't have anything that's connecting to that route yet?
One more time.
So we don't have anything that connects to that route? So
Yeah, we
adding a
don't.
button to submit.
We could test via Postman technically, or should we? Or would you say we should implement first? Would you say implement first or Postman first? 'Cause I would try Postman.
What do y'all think?
I don't know.
I like to see Postman. I don't usually go that route, so.
Right, like a little Postman.
You absolutely can.
Would you advise something different?
I would advise. I mean, you look at this route. You can be pretty confident that it's working. You've written enough routes in your time that that when you look at this, you're like, okay, I'm pretty sure this is working.
Yeah.
And so, especially in a context like this, where a lot of like switching back and forth and testing is gonna slow you down, I'd say if you're 80% or 90% confident on this, pretend it works and write the code that uses it. And then if something doesn't work, you can be like, okay, wait, let me double check that route.
Okay. Then in that, yeah, I'm not gonna do all that extra testing then. So let's
So
say
Hannah, you said you wanted to jump in. Do you want to tag in the last 8 minutes? Cool. Snaps for Jedi.
Okay.
And as Hannah's doing this, one strategy thing about this that I would probably do in this if I was doing this is the feature of has this user already liked this, and if so, like can they not click it, or I forget exactly what it says. My recollection is that one is 10 points and it's kind of at the end. I would actually save that till the end to implement, so that I'm getting all of the other functionality, like the bigger moving pieces working. And then if I have time, I get those extra 10 points. But because it's a comparatively small amount of points for an investment of work, I would just save that particular thing till the end. So what are you working on now?
Creating a button. So this part I'm a little confused on, like making a button that doesn't need a form but still submits to a post route.
Okay.
So how do you just, like, what am I submitting? I guess I would pull the album. See, what is the route to?
Does someone have a feeling pretty clear about this? Want to talk Hannah through it?
It might be. Sort of. I got it like mostly working, but so you're gonna add an event handler to that button that makes a fetch call to the route on the back end.
Is it on click? What's the?
So I did it in the
JavaScript,
JavaScript.
the public JavaScript, the public folder.
But you'll need, before you do that, you need to create an ID on the button itself in the HTML.
So we get the like button, const probably, const like button, called the down. Document.
So
Document the query selector. Sorry, I meant like button equal document query selector.
Wait, what are you talking about?
Yeah. So the like button is equal to document the query selector hash the ID.
Oh, in here. Wait.
No, in the
This is the part where I always like get really lost. Actually.
So you're totally doing it legit where you started doing that function. You can have that anonymous function that you started making
Yeah.
return back that element. So you can get rid of the curly braces at the end, and then have the arrow function just go straight out to document.query selector.
It's like that.
And then you can select that button with
ID,
normal
that ID.
notation, hash
map, like I think you call it like button.
It's like
Hash like button.
And why document query selector versus jQuery?
Is jQuery in this?
Yeah, that's what.
You have to add it
jQuery installed.
Yeah, you might have to add it.
Yeah, it just wasn't specified anywhere, so we just.
I was just going by the libraries that we already.
Yeah.
It would save
But-
me time from like Googling the
If you can.
for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think jQuery in general, like it's got a lot of functionality that can save you time if you're doing a lot of DOM manipulation. So, for me, it's kind of a toss-up. Like, do you take a minute and import the library and then be able to use it in whatever you're doing, or do you use vanilla JS? And again, I think it's a toss-up.
So now we just have to create the event listener. Event listener.
So back in the JS file, say like button, just the variable you created.
Yeah.
No
No
function. So dot
Event.
add event listener.
that.
And then
Then it takes a type. It takes a go from parent. It takes a type. On submit. What is it?
Click,
Click.
quote click
Click is fine.
on the click event.
Yeah, and callback function.
so we haven't written the function
Function
yet.
yet,
We can just make a name for it. And you'll put it in there without calling it. It's just like the name of the function.
On the function, yeah. So function.
What is it gonna be?
Oh, so just whatever we want to call this function, we just have to put the literal name in.
So you're saying define the function separately and then.
I mean, that's how
You
I've
can
done
do
it. I
that.
don't know if, maybe.
Usually it's easier. This was like functional programming, right? You can pass a function then instead of passing having a long thing.
Yeah, if it were me doing it, I'd just write an anonymous arrow function.
Sure.
Uh,
I think because LS was one thing, so there's no need to define someone else and use it that variable.
Like
So
that?
just keep it anonymous. Keep it anonymous then within the arguments.
Okay. Sorry. What's next?
Then would we target the number of likes? And save that into a variable to then increment.
So ask yourself the question, what does this function need to accomplish?
When you click, it should increment the like number
Okay.
in the paragraph.
And it's also doing the
Oh,
fetch
the
call.
fetch that.
Yeah, the fetch call, yeah.
So it's doing two. So yeah.
So this one's gonna fetch like the total number of the likes that already existed and one right? And then sends that back.
It should be calling the add like function to add a like to the database, and then once it gets that result back, it should be manipulating the DOM to add a like and add the red border.
So I'm considering that we're not actually waiting for a response. Maybe we just wait for the response before we increment. We can just send that increment with the request, and then if something goes really wrong, then we can de-increment it if there's like a catch or something that happens, if there's some kind of error in the response.
Which I would do in general in a project. Nothing in the spec that says you have to decrement if it's not successful. So I would skip that for now. So this might be a case where creating some functions, so actually creating a few named functions, may be helpful for your thinking. So increment like counter could be a function, and its purpose is to find that element and increment it. When I'm doing front-end JavaScript like this, and I'm not in React, React is just much better, but I usually like to separate like UI updates from like fetch calls from actions. And so like an action would be user clicks the button. And in that action, you want to make a fetch call and a UI update, right? So I would probably separate out those three just for my sanity so that I'm doing one thing per function. Make sense? So we're at noon. Has this been helpful?
Oh, yeah,
Snaps for Hannah.
absolutely.
What's one thing that you're taking away from today's session? I'll ask Hannah and Jedi first, since you were in the hot seat.
It's really stressful, Kevin. That's what I said yesterday, man.
Yeah.
I felt really comfortable with everything until this part. So, which is frustrating because.
Is it because you're in the hot seat?
No, I'm not very good with like manipulating the law.
I have the sense generally that that's true of folks in this phase. That and it makes sense, because if you look at the content of the phase, a lot of it is on the back end or server rendering, and comparatively little is on front end DOM manipulation. But I get the sense that most folks, when you hit a point like this, are not as comfortable. And so that would be one thing I would directly encourage you to do. If that's you, make sure that by the time you take a challenge like this, you're comfortable enough that you could code more or less through this front-end DOM manipulation. If you need to look up some jQuery, you need to look up whatever, fine. But one place that I have seen people in general get stuck is like, I have something that I need to do on the front end, but I'm not actually sure how to do it. And when that's the case, that can be a reason for not passing an exam, for not passing an interview like this, is you get to a point and you need to spend enough time looking things up because you're not sure how to do it, that then you've spent, 35 minutes or 30 minutes or something like that on one feature. So if that's you, drill the front end stuff, add a like button, increment it, decrement it, all of that.
In the assessment, do you specify what technologies you use, or is it up to you completely?
In terms of like a library like jQuery? Yeah, I'm not aware of any particular restrictions around that in the actual challenges, like you cannot use this. So I would say, in general, assume that you can bring in a library that you can you can utilize, and then just beware if it does say specifically like you cannot use this. But again, I don't think that's the case.
Maybe look at the guideline of the things that you like technologies you'd be expected to know or would be expected to use for the assessment, but you're not limited to that. You can add to it. It would probably help. For example, like I said, for front end, you can use like Ajax or jQuery and all this like expected to know these to use this assessment, but you're not limited to this.
I would say it's this. So this is the practice phase curriculum page. And yeah, I'd say it's this because this includes front-end HTML, CSS, browser JavaScript, how to use Ajax to dynamically update single-page apps. And yeah, we don't require any particular library. I think probably in a month or two, it'll be React. We'll be saying, to the extent possible, be using React in your front end. So one more. What are you taking away? What are you learning?
I feel like I need to kind of drill down more on my routing, like I'm actually more comfortable with special stuff like that, but I just need to have a better understanding of how you can do different routing structures.
Cool.
Maybe for me, like some like muscle memory. When I watch a live code and I understand everything, I was like, oh yeah, I know this, I need that. But then I sit, sometimes we found the keyboard like, word start. I just get that log code. So it's helpful to see.
Good. One of the hopes that our team has had for these assessments is what I'm hearing you say, which is I do the sample assessment and I have a pretty clear sense of where my strengths and weaknesses are. And so one strength is I understand what's going on. One weakness is I'm not comfortable sitting down at the keyboard and just diving in. I could use some more muscle memory. And so I'm glad to hear that, and I hope that is folks' experience in general, that by engaging with this, you get a sense of, okay, where am I at? Where do I need to be relative to passing into the next phase?
I think for me, like what we did on the README file, it was very helpful. It was very structured and specific. So if you're lost, you can just pick one thing. You just do that one thing first, and like open up to other things. And that's I think what I like it. Basically, I go into a project, like, okay, let me just like start coding, and then do that, I'm breaking it down, taking the time. And in my mind, I feel like this is like a waste of time. Like just like to start coding would be better, but then the more I'm doing this one, I'm actually spending more time on structuring and breaking it down and typing these notes and these specific steps would be very helpful. So that's one thing I need to improve on.
Yeah, it's a me too for that, because when something has this many moving parts, I would just pretty universally be worse at it if I didn't have a guide that I'd made for myself. And again, that may not be true for everyone. Cool. Pretty good? All right. Have a good day.